So, in our last discussion, we had talked about the directly acting bronchodilators, under which we had talked about the beta 2 sympathomimetics, the M3 anticholinergics, and the methylxanthines. Right? Now, as you can see from this little chart over here, we are left with the corticosteroids. Let's bring this up. So we are left with the corticosteroids, the leukotriene antagonists, mast cell stabilizers, and the drugs which prevent the antigen IgE reaction. Now the thing is, these individually they don't have much to be discussed about, except probably the corticosteroids. So that's why we are going to discuss them in one video, which is this one, and hopefully this video won't be as long as the previous one, right? Now the common thing about all these four avenues of treatment for bronchial asthma is that none of them directly bronchodilate. They lead to some kind of they antagonize something, they prevent something, they block some kind of receptor, they do something which indirectly leads to bronchodilation. So with that in our mind, let's now talk about them. Okay, we'll start with the corticosteroids first, but before going on into the details of the individual corticosteroids or even corticosteroids as a method for treatment, let's first very quickly let me bring your attention to I hope you know this chart, which is the production of prostaglandins and leukotrienes. There was this flow chart, there was this the method of the steps for prostaglandin synthesis or leukotriene synthesis, right? We had studied that in biochemistry. Anyways, even if you don't remember, we are not going into the details of that. Let's just write it down. So, phospholipids. Okay. Now, we have phospholipids in our cell membrane. These phospholipids, they are acted upon by an enzyme which is phospholipase A2. Phospholipase A2 actually converts these phospholipids into arachidonic acids. Arachidonic acids, not amino acids, by the way. Okay, arachidonic acids, 20 carbon acids. We know this from our biochemistry knowledge. These arachidonic acids now, they again we are not going into the details. They are acted upon either by an enzyme called COX, which is cyclooxygenase, and we get the synthesis of different prostaglandins, or they are acted upon by LOX, lipoxygenase, and we get different leukotrienes. Okay, these leukotrienes, as I had mentioned, they are very important as far as the bronchial asthma pathophysiology goes, because leukotrienes, when they act upon their receptors, will cause bronchoconstriction. Okay, so that's why leukotrienes are very, very important mediators of bronchoconstriction, and that is why we have an entire avenue of treating bronchial asthma by inhibiting leukotrienes. Now, just by this entire pathway, we can understand how steroids act, how leukotriene antagonists act. Let's see how. See, steroids, what they will do is, they will actually inhibit this step. Steroids or corticosteroids. Steroids inhibit this phospholipase A2, and thus this entire remaining pathway will not actually occur. On the other hand, we have leukotriene antagonists, right? Leukotriene antagonists, what they will do is they won't let the formed leukotrienes bind with their receptors. So they will actually leukotriene antagonists. So they will actually antagonize the leukotriene receptors, or we will see the cysteine leukotriene 1 receptors, and thus the leukotriene won't be able to bind with its receptor, and hence there will be no bronchoconstriction. Another way, another drug specifically is there which will actually selectively inhibit lipoxygenase enzyme, and it will bring about the inhibition of formation of leukotrienes, and hence again the same effect, diminished bronchoconstriction or bronchodilation. Okay. So what is this drug? This drug is called Xyleuton. Xyleuton. Okay. So we will come into the details of each of these things, but for now let's talk about steroids, the corticosteroids. Okay. Now, as you can see, corticosteroids, they are actually preventing this entire pathway because they are inhibiting this pathway at its earliest stage. That is why we know that prostaglandins and leukotrienes, they are very important mediators of inflammation. Prostaglandins, leukotrienes. Leukotriene is a bronchoconstrictor, but prostaglandins and leukotrienes, they are also mediators of inflammation. So, since such major mediators of inflammation are not being formed under the influence of steroids, that is why steroids are the best anti-inflammatory drugs. Now, since asthma itself is an inflammatory reaction, thus we can understand why steroids are a very important drug choice for asthma. So now let's talk a little about the steroids. So corticosteroids. See, corticosteroids, they are mostly there of two types based on how those steroids are administered to the patient, right? So if the steroids, they have okay, let's go with white here. If they are administered suppose intravenously, so they will spread throughout the body, so they will then be said to be systemic steroids, that is, they act throughout the body. But if the steroids are given via suppose an inhalational route, then we would say they are inhalational steroids. Inhalational steroids. Okay. So inhalational corticosteroids, or ICS, we abbreviate that as ICS, inhalational corticosteroids. This is majorly our topic of discussion because we are talking about bronchial asthma treatment. So obviously we will be talking about the inhalational corticosteroids, not steroids as a whole, because steroids as a whole we will talk about later when we will talk about endocrine pharmacology. But for now we are talking about steroids from the perspective of treating bronchial asthma. So first of all, let's get the names out of the way because they often turn to be the more problematic thing in pharmacology, right? The names of the drugs. So as far as the names are concerned, if I am to talk about systemic, we have two drugs more or less, two very important ones actually. I think you have heard of these names: hydrocortisone and prednisolone. Prednisolone. Hydrocortisone and prednisolone, these are two of the most important systemic corticosteroids. Now, as far as inhalational corticosteroids go, which is our topic of discussion, although we don't have much to say actually, beclomethasone propionate, beclomethasone dipropionate, okay. Then we have with the same B, budesonide. Then we have fluticasone, then cyclesonide, These are more or less the inhalational corticosteroids. Okay, beclomethasone dipropionate, budesonide, fluticasone is also a propionate, and cyclesonide. Okay, so now let's talk about inhalational corticosteroids. We won't be talking about the individual corticosteroids because they don't much have anything to offer individually speaking. But how are steroids a kind of a therapy? So as I mentioned, steroids are a method of treating asthma because asthma is kind of an inflammatory disorder. That is why. They are not bronchodilators or anything. They are only meant for treating the inflammation part of asthma. That is why, since they are not directly acting bronchodilators, that is why inhalational corticosteroids, they are kind of prophylactic in their use. Prophylactic. Okay. That is, we don't use them mostly for acute cases. Although we can use them for severe chronic cases, but it still has to be chronic. We use them for severe chronic asthma, true, but it has to be chronic, because when you are saying chronic, that means the asthma attacks are recurring. That means we have to not only treat the asthma episodes, but we actually have to treat the underlying inflammation. Treat underlying inflammation. So what exactly do the inhalational corticosteroids they do? By reversing or by being anti-inflammatory, they will actually lead to see, now here is the thing. Whenever we use the drugs meant for treating chronic cases means it's been happening for a long time. That means that it's not just that the patient is having breathing problems severely sometimes, that patient is having daily cases of asthma, which means that the bronchial hyperreactivity is very high. So the bronchial smooth muscles, they are pretty deteriorated, their elasticity is gone, their smoothness is gone, elasticity is gone. So we need to reverse these, right? So for reversing these, that's why we use long-term drugs like anticholinergics or steroids, because we don't want the long-term harmful effects, right? So that is why corticosteroid therapy is a very, very important prophylactic. In fact, it is the drug of choice for prophylactic, DOC, drug of choice for prophylactic asthma treatment. Okay. So that is why any kind of chronic case, that is it might be COPD as well, we give inhalational corticosteroids. Obviously along with a combination of some short acting agents like we have our obviously the adrenergic drugs like salbutamol, salmeterol, those drugs, right. With combination we give steroids. That's why asthma is often a combinational therapy, because the additive effect of bronchodilation that actually increases, right. So anyways, now there are some adverse effects of corticosteroids. This is an important thing. What are the adverse effects? We have some common adverse effects like hoarseness of voice, because see this is actually going via the inhalational route, right. So hoarseness of voice can be there, then throat sore, that is sore throat can be there. But the most important side effect or adverse effect rather is oropharyngeal candidiasis. Oropharyngeal candidiasis. Why? The reason for that is steroids, inhalational corticosteroids or even steroids as a whole, they are excellent immunosuppressants. That is, they are excellent immunosuppressants, right, which means that they will actually suppress our immunity. So when we are going for the inhalational route, what's happening is about 95% of the drug that gets deposited in the airways being the throat, the pharynx, all those regions, all up to the bronchioles. Only 5% of the drug actually reaches the alveoli. So this 95% of the drug, what it will do is it will lead to immunosuppression. It will suppress the immunity, it will suppress the immune system locally, and it will make the entire throat and pharynx region a very vulnerable area, and that's what leads to a very common throat infection, that is candidiasis. So how do you treat this, or rather how do you prevent this? That's a better question. So we prevent it by gargling. Just gargle with some hot water or with some water, okay, after steroid, inhalational corticosteroid administration. So after you administer the steroid, gargle, so that no residue drug is left out in the throat and the vulnerable areas, okay. But if at all the candidiasis that actually occurs, if it actually occurs, then we have to use some kind of antifungal agent like nystatin. What was the spelling? Nystatin, TATI, yes. So nystatin can be used, okay, for treating, but more importantly, gargle. Gargle is GA or GU? I think it is GA. It might be GA actually. So gargle after inhalational corticosteroid administration. Okay. So that's more or less all about the corticosteroids. Now, I mentioned something about this drug, which is Xyluton. So xyluton, again, we don't have much to say about these drugs except what they do. So xyluton, how do you remember this drug? This is not a steroid, by the way. This is a drug which is actually selectively inhibiting the lipoxygenase enzyme, and hence leading to a decrease in the leukotriene synthesis. So Leu for leukotriene, NO for number. So decreases xyluton, decreases, or rather it actually selectively inhibits the lipoxygenase, okay, and thus it will cause a bronchodilatory effect. All right, that is xyluton. See, we don't have much to say. And another thing you can remember is I stands for inhibits. I stands for inhibits. Inhibits leukotriene number. Okay. Now the next step, we saw that the leukotrienes, they were actually binding with the receptors, and we can prevent that by using leukotriene antagonists. So leukotriene receptor antagonists, let's talk a little about them. So leukotriene receptor antagonists. So leukotriene receptor antagonists, first let's get the bad thing out of the way, which is the names. The names of the leukotriene receptor antagonists, they are pretty unique kind of a name. Do you know why? Let me write it down and you will understand. The names are Monteleucast and Zafirleucast. Monteleucast and Zafirleucast. Okay, this might have been LU. Okay, that's what I'm seeing. Never mind. So Monteleucast and Zafirleucast. So you have to be a little careful with the names of the drugs as far as their spellings are concerned, because since they are names, so they are non-negotiable. The names are non-negotiable. You have to remember them the way they are spelled. So unfortunately, not much can be done. So Monteleucast. So again, you can remember this by the fact that leuc for leukotriene, ast for antagonist. So Monte and Zafir, these are kind of the prefixes. Leucast, 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 Leuc for leukotriene, ast for antagonist. Okay, so what they are actually doing is they antagonize a receptor of the leukotriene, which is antagonize the cystenyl leukotriene receptors. That is, they won't let the leukotrienes bind to their receptors, and hence leukotrienes will not be able to bring about the bronchoconstriction. That's all. That is all. They are not that. They are actually, the thing about these later drugs that we will be discussing, for example, xyluton, leukotriene receptor antagonists, or that antigen IgE reaction inhibitors, these drugs are not that effective. They are not that used in day-to-day asthma treatment. They are more specialized things, right? And they are not that effective. Not everyone responds to these drugs. Although leukotriene receptor antagonists, they are more effective in children. That's something that you can remember. They are more effective in children. But again, we have better choices. And the better choices we have already studied in our last discussion. That is salbutamol, salmeterol, those anticholinergics or theophylline, or even in this discussion steroids are very important. So those are mostly the major avenues for treating asthma. These rest of the other things that we are studying, they are more or less additional material, but we need to understand them obviously. Okay. So Montelukast, Zafirlukast, these, as you can understand, they are indicated for prophylaxis. Prophylaxis. In fact, almost all the drugs that we are studying today, they are prophylactic because they are not direct bronchodilators. And if you are not a directly acting bronchodilator, then I am sorry, you cannot be used for acute cases, right? That makes sense because they will take some time, they will lead to inhibition of some previous step, and that will gradually bring about bronchodilation. So it's used for long term effectiveness obviously. And the thing about Montelukast and Zafirlukast is that they are very safe drugs. So that is something which plays a role in them being used for children. But again, not everyone is responsive to these drugs. Okay. Okay. So that's more or less everything about leukotriene receptor antagonists. So that brings about the end for this chart, this synthesis flowchart kind of a thing. We have studied the steroids, we have studied, there wasn't anything to study about xyluton, it's just another drug, and we have kind of named the leukotriene receptor antagonists as well. The thing that remains are the mast cell stabilizers and the drugs which prevent the antigen IgE reaction. So mast cell stabilizer, again there isn't much to talk about them. So mast cell stabilizers, as I had mentioned in a previous video, what exactly is the deal with mast cell stabilizer? Bronchial asthma is brought about because of the degranulation, right? The degranulation of mast cells, that is what releases those inflammatory mediators, brings about an inflammatory reaction, brings about bronchoconstriction and all those complications of asthma. So if you can prevent this degranulation of mast cells, that is, even when a sensitized mast cell binds to a particular antigen, even then the mast cell will not degranulate because it has been stabilized by some kind of a drug, then obviously that's better. So that is the work of mast cell stabilizer, and the most important mast cell stabilizer example is sodium, not just sodium, that would have been so much better if it had been just sodium, sodium chromoglycate, okay. So sodium chromoglycate is the name of the drug which is actually used for mast cell stabilizer. There is another one, it is known as nidochromil. It also has nidochromil, not that important, but sodium chromoglycate, this one is definitely important. As far as importance for a non-important drug choice goes, that's why. Okay, not as important as salbutamol, salmeterol, those drugs. So the thing about mast cell stabilizers, I have already mentioned what it is, but the thing is, again, you can kind of see this coming, that you are trying to prevent degranulation of mast cell. But if the mast cell has already degranulated, if the inflammatory mediators have already been released, then mast cell stabilizer has no work, then it won't have any work to do, it's useless. That's why mast cell stabilizer, again, no surprise, it's used for prophylaxis. Okay, it cannot be used for treating an acute asthma case or even an asthma episode, whether it be acute or chronic. It's only meant for prophylaxis because it can only prevent asthma before the asthma episode actually occurs. Okay, okay. So that's all about mast cell stabilizers. Now we are kind of left with the antigen IgE, the antigen IgE reaction inhibitor. So as I had mentioned in a previous video again, that if you can prevent, suppose this is the mast cell with the granules and this has been sensitized, that is first time exposure led to the formation of IgE antibodies against that particular antigen, and these IgE have bound to the mast cell, thus sensitizing the mast cell. Now second time exposure, if that occurs, the second time the same antigen is coming, we have been exposed to that same antigen and it will come and bind to the IgE. That will lead to degranulation and that will lead to all those fiasco. But if we can prevent this, if we can prevent this from happening, then we can prevent the entire fiasco from happening, right? So for preventing this from happening, what we have done, and this is again something which will be a recurring theme in many of the different systems under systemic pharmacology. What is that? Let me see. What we have done is we have developed a kind of drug, but more importantly that kind of drug is known as a monoclonal antibody. We have developed a kind of monoclonal antibody which is used as a drug, and in this case, in case of asthma, that monoclonal antibody is known as omalizumab. Omalizumab. This monoclonal antibody omalizumab against, this is a monoclonal antibody against IgE. So instead of the IgE, this will actually bind to, so not instead of IgE, I am sorry, instead of the antigen, this will bind to the IgE, and hence the antigen itself will not be able to bind to the sensitized mast cell, because now the IgE has already bound to this useless thing which cannot bring about degranulation of mast cell. So the entire fiasco will be saved. Okay. So zumab, this will be a very common suffix. This will be a very common umab. This suffix will be very common because we have developed a host of monoclonal antibodies with different prefixes for their names, but all having the same umab in their suffix. This stands for, M stands for monoclonal, and as you can already guess, AB stands for antibody. Monoclonal antibody. So monoclonal antibodies is something that we have kind of studied in immunology, in different subjects in immunology, but monoclonal antibody, they are a very important you might say source of production of drugs which are actually used for basically these immunological reactions, because this is an antigen antibody reaction. So we have to use a monoclonal antibody to kind of even the odds here. Okay. So omali, this much you have to remember, no negotiating that. But umab, this is something which will be a common suffix for all monoclonal antibodies, which we will talk about subsequently when the time comes in different other chapters, okay, in systemic pharmacology, not just the respiratory pharmacology, different other organ systems. So this is a monoclonal antibody which is prepared against the antigen, and that will bind with the IgE, and thus the antigen won't be able to bind with the IgE, and thus again the entire asthma, inflammatory reactions, they will not occur. So again you can very well guess that this is used for prophylaxis, because once the antigen has bound to the sensitized mast cell and all those cascade of reactions start, then omalizumab or other monoclonal antibodies will not have any effect. Did I say any other monoclonal antibodies? In this case it's only omalizumab. Omalizumab is the only monoclonal antibody that at least I have found in my books, right? So that is more or less the treatment plan for bronchial asthma. So we kind of talked about everything that there was to talk about as far as asthma treatment goes, the pharmacology aspect of that obviously, and I think we don't have anything left, okay. So that kind of completes the bronchial asthma part, and that almost finishes respiratory pharmacology. A little part of that is the cough, drugs for cough, but that would be a very short video, because again it would be like this video. This video, if you kind of notice, if you have noticed, I don't know, it was more or less just citing the drug type and then naming the drug, because there wasn't much to talk about, whereas the previous video we had a lot to talk about. That's why I had saved those other topics for this video. Anyways, thank you very much, and I hope that this video helped you in any way. Thank you very much, and I'll see you on the flip side.